Okay, sorry, it cut off there, but basically what I was saying is I'm going to do a Hearthstone sort of special episode tonight going into the new year, and so that's fine. Like, I was going to do that anyway, but I figured I may as well do this too, just as like a bonus thing. Basically seeing how long Whizbang can last or whatever. Like I said, it's a card that kind of is fun and zany and gives you random decks, or I might do other gimmicks too, but like, whatever, some sort of format with that. And then, you know, so here let's celebrate what is the eve of a new year. I guess everybody thinks of like, oh, the holiday is actually tomorrow, but actually, right, everybody does everything today or tonight. But I guess that's why they'll be hungover. That's why tomorrow is like a lot of places might be closed tomorrow, but they're not closed today. So let's look at the eve of a new year by trying to conquer old fallacies and try to overcome them and understand like what are my top 5 most important fallacies, or what I would create as part of my debate format would actually be like anti-fallacies. So let me try to remember some of them, like you cannot dissuade with reason what came about by desire is a good one. It's an anti-fallacy about belief systems. Like, you could debate somebody who's religious till the end of time, right? And you'll never get anywhere because they'll just reinterpret, oh, this holy book actually meant this, or we can't question it, or whatever, right? So you could question it forever and you won't get anywhere. So what's important to realize is the reason why they believe it in the first place is not from a place of logic and reason and facts, because throughout all of human history, people have believed in all kind of different gods, so they can't all be wrong and yours is just right, or whatever. Some form of spirituality always existed. So it's just a human mind and a desire for certainty and structure and whatever, right, to shut down critical thinking and objectivity and stuff like that. So it's pointless to try to dissuade them from a place of logic and reason and facts, because that's not why they believe it in the first place, right? They believe it from a place of desire. But the ultimate conclusion could be, because I never say that all religion is necessarily bad or that you shouldn't believe it. I more so just observe the fact that, like, you know, I've even sometimes said it can be a positive thing. It can have a positive psychological effect on people. So, for example, you know, okay, but don't specify it. That's one of my key phrases, too, in Logical Razors. Don't specify the conflict, or in this case, don't specify the belief system or the specifics. So when you get lost in the details, now it becomes, oh, well, but Jesus versus this guy versus, you know, Hindu gods, Ganesh, and whatever. Like, it doesn't matter, right? When you get into that, you get kind of lost in the, you know, minutia of it that doesn't really matter. Like, if you want to take lessons out of it, you want to say, okay, don't hurt people, you know, live a positive way. That's one thing. But then people get caught up on the specifics, but, you know, why not just believe it in a general sense, right? Like, whatever existence we have, whether it's God, whether it's nature, right, whatever we want to call it, like, we have what we have, let's try to make the most of it. But instead, we're trained to not make the most of it, and we're instead trained to be in a subversive half-mast state, like, oh, we're peasants working for promises of heaven, or we're controlled by all these pretenses. There's a way to keep people in line like a trained animal, and so you get them to believe in that to kind of shut down their critical thinking. But that's the point, is like, you know, you'll never get anywhere with that because they believe it for a different reason. And again, don't get lost in the specifics of it, right? The general code, you know, it makes you wonder, like, why can't you just follow those same ideas just from like a golden rule standpoint? Like, oh, you don't want to be hurt, so don't hurt other people. Like, as simple as that. Why can't it be as simple as that? I guess it's because it's the acknowledgement of a subjective basis. Like, it shows you, well, you're just doing it because you choose to, not because it's absolute. So now anybody can just do it anyway. And that is the reality, unfortunately. People do that anyway, right? So it's not absolute. But people want to believe that, or it makes it easier to control them that way, or be secure in that state. So, you know, you basically train people to get gratification from the behavior instead of simply saying, okay, they're sacrificing doing that behavior in potential self-interest, and so they're just choosing to do that. Instead of them just choosing to do that, no, it's like, oh, it's God, it's meant to be. But you still have the choice to do that. So it's kind of a contradiction even of the supposed absolute, because, well, if it was absolute, then why would you even be able to do it in the first place, right? The laws of nature would prohibit you or whatever. Never mind the fact that in nature, animals kill each other all the time, and we're killing animals all the time. It's not exactly like a novel thing that we're, trying to make everything revolve around us and treat it like it's somehow special. So the other point is the fact that, you have this situation where you're basically put in a position to, again, don't get caught up on the specifics. The overall, having some structure can be psychologically positive for people. And there was a good, devil's advocate, I guess maybe literally devil's advocate in this discussion, but where there was a framing, I posed the argument myself and I kind of countered it where, or maybe somebody else said it originally and then I rephrased it, but basically the topic came up that this was my response, right? And it's almost like I'm not taking a side, so it's me playing kind of the other side. Somebody says, right, that how can you believe it if you know it's not true, right? The specifics and the details, right, are necessary to that extent instead of just a general structure. So again, don't get lost on the specifics would be the core lesson, but how can you believe it if you know it's not true, right? Even if it has some psychologically positive effects. But that's the same point as then I came back and said, well, why do you then value entertainment? Why do you then value, and then I countered this claim too, why do you value entertainment? You know it's not real, but it can be psychologically positive, it can distract you, it can inspire you, it can, whatever. So it can have a psychologically positive effect on you, the same way that religion can, even though they're both not real. So you spend time and focus and money and attention and energy on that, on fiction, right, the same way that you would do on religion, or the same way that you would do on, certain other things, right, that aren't real, but you still value them anyway. And so what does that mean? It means that, but now I counter it again and I say, but the difference is that one of them you acknowledge isn't real, so you know that escapism isn't real, or absolute, or anything like that. You don't have to worship it, you can just do it. Right, versus religion, you're pretending it's absolute and you're pretending it's true and you're pretending it's real. Whereas with what I call folly, favoritism, escapism, is you're not pretending it's real. So I don't know if that makes it better or worse. Well, it's not real, but you still focus time, attention, and energy on it. So does that make it worse then? But I was basically analogizing the process. It's easy to dismiss that. Say, oh, if you were to dismiss religion and not take it seriously, but you're still addressing some of the same psychological needs just in different ways, right, that might be a little less dishonest, but you're doing entertainment and escapism. Well, that's not real and has no impact on your life really. It's just a psychological thing, whatever. But you're still doing it, you're still valuing it, putting time, attention, money, whatever. So it's a similar kind of thing. And then let's also look at the fact that I don't know, basically I said a few things to do with that. Or here's an immersion kind of thing. You can explain certain things like hypnosis this way. The way that people sometimes sensationalize it in the media and stuff, it's not quite what it's made out to be. But you might think, oh, how could somebody be hypnotized to cluck like a chicken or something, right? Up on stage or something like that. And it's not you're being forced to. It's kind of like a social pressure environment and you're kind of in a more relaxed, receptive state. But the thing about it that's interesting is you might think oh, you would never do something silly like that, forget your name up on stage, you've seen a stage show, or cluck like a chicken, but then because it's not real, or that's not true. But guess what resembles that a little bit? Well, there's actually two things. There's this thing called highway hypnosis, which is you're driving kind of to a familiar location and you kind of aren't really thinking about it and you kind of forget, or you're kind of spaced out thinking about something else, and then you get there and you don't even really remember the drive, right? So you're kind of in a light trance type state there. This is just my little psychology expertise coming out. But then the other point is the fact that when you're watching a movie or reading a book, it's not real, but you can be so immersed in it that you still end up crying or getting emotional or being affected by it. you know it's not real, right? Oh, is that silly? Why would I cry over over a fictional character, right? Why would you do that? So that's a similar thing. You're getting so immersed in something that you're affected by it, right? So that's very similar to that. You think, oh, how could you possibly, do something silly like that on stage? But that's exactly the same tendency. It's like if you're so focused, so immersed, right? You're not thinking about anything else. You're kind of in a relaxed state, right? You're in this kind of peer pressure, social kind of environment. It's real in that sense because the human imagination is so powerful. But it's not that somebody's making you do something that you don't want to do. It's that you're just so immersed in something, right? Like you kind of give permission and consent to be in that situation, to be in that relaxed state, etc. And now what somebody does with that, right, it's still within your confines. Like, they can't make you do anything they want. But it's like you choose to go in the movie theater and suspend your disbelief and critical thinking and kind of focus and immerse. And now if you end up crying or getting emotional, that's, you gave consent to go in the theater, but what happens after that, right, depends on how effective the illusion is. It's the same thing here. It's like, it depends how effective it is. Like, oh, you give consent to go up on stage and to go, like, under the trance and stuff, and now it's like, they can easily, like, you're more receptive and focused and relaxed. So now it's just, I don't know, you're consenting to the situation, and then the specifics of it are kind of more up for interpretation. But so that's right. In that sense, it's not fake, but it's also not like, oh, they can just make you do whatever they want, right? It's not quite that way. And so, right, they're basically, I think that's the best analogy, right? You know it's not real, but you still cry during a movie or a book or something story, right, over a character. You get immersed in it, you get emotional, even though you know it's not real, right? So if somebody can get you to cry over a fake, made-up character, then they can get you to do anything because it's your own imagination that you're playing on, right? So if you're so immersed and you're so focused and you're in a more relaxed state, right, you can absolutely, have some of that happen. And so let's look at another fallacy here, like closed structure contrivance. I don't know why I suddenly just wanted to discuss that, but closed structure contrivance is basically like where, let's look at this just as a basic premise, right? Something is posed as like a false absolute, like, oh, this, people in society, the exact society you're living in, it's absolute, unquestionable, whatever. And then it's like somebody doesn't go along with it exactly, or they're like, oh, they lack the ability to do it, right? It's their inability to do this absolute, right? So it's seeing the world in that way. You can either do this absolute thing, whether it be social norms, whether it be whatever, functionalism, right? And every era of human history will have its own definition of their own absolute. So if everything is absolute, nothing is, an arbitrary kind of basis. So what happens is, look at how these water spots get like stuck there, like they don't come off, right? They're like frozen in place. But no, it's like, so you would treat your state as absolute. It was either like you could either achieve the absolute state and practice it and reinforce, regurgitate it, or you could lack the ability to do it. There's either the inability to do the false absolute or just doing the false absolute. There is no other option. It couldn't be that you're actually trapped in that closed structure, false duality, contrivance state, whereas somebody else, oh, they might have a different intention or measure or different, priority completely, different sense of value, like the absolutist with time instead of money, or stimuli, acme, hedonism, or like, like where it's not about the same thing. Like, so out of all of human existence and all human imagination, the human variable, as I call it, everything you can possibly do, every lifestyle you can possibly have, every measure, every freedom, everything you can possibly do in your entire existence, right? It has to be funneled through this half-mass contrivance state with permission, with control, with overextension. But it's like, it can't be that you have some different measure or freedom or self-awareness. This is how like the herd, hive mind, sheep work, or this is why people call like life a simulation or something, because everything is like that. You'll insist upon, you're a kind of a trained animal, and you'll insist upon something the way that you'll insist upon it like this, where you you treat your lifestyle and the specific technology and social norms, whatever, of the time that you've been trained and indoctrinated into, you'll treat them as absolute, but you won't really be actively aware of them or hold them accountable. So it's a non-accountable false absolute. You'll treat it as absolute, but it's kind of vague and just you'll kind of adjust it to suit the specifics of your day-to-day life. But the overall thing you just treat as an absolute. The problem with that is you treat it as an absolute, but so either you can do that absolute thing and live in that way, or you cannot do it. But if you don't do it, it's not because they could possibly have some other choice, right? Oh, you can't be Amish, you can't be a minimalist, you can't live any other lifestyle, any other way, right? It's just, that you lack the ability to live the right way, right? Do this exact right thing, even if it's undefined, arbitrary, non-accountable, but still some vague social contrivance like, you have to do things exactly this way. And if you don't do it, then you lack the ability to do it that way. Not that doing that way is somehow subversive, or you don't vouch for it, or you choose something else, different measure, different, priority of all the things you could possibly do in life, right? Maybe that doesn't align exactly with that, right? So you're taking everything, right? All of human possibility, freedom, variable choices, and you're boiling it down to you can only make the right choice or the wrong choice. And if you don't do the exact thing that society wants you to do, then it can't be that you chose that. Right? It couldn't be that, you choose to live a minimalist lifestyle, and therefore you don't have to do any of the things that people do in society. You can live in a nudist colony, you don't need clothes, all the things that people do every day, right? If you don't need those things, you don't require them, you don't desire them, you don't care. You choose something different. So pretend somebody's walking around naked in public, you'll be arrested for it, whatever. But it's like, this person's just blank. Like, you'll label them, they're just crazy, or they're just something negative. It couldn't be that they choose that. They prefer that. So what's wrong? That's their choice. You don't have to do it. But it's the freedom of being able to do it has to be condemned and put down. Otherwise, everybody might do it. And you'll realize, it's just a construct and you don't need to do anything specifically like that. So, right, so what happens is that at least the roads are more clear today. I can't remember how bad it was when I did the thing in the morning yesterday. I should make a point to do them more so in the morning because just is kind of better visibility for you, even though my windshield is dirty and impossible to clean. But the point of all this is the fact that it couldn't be that there's some other preference or desire or measure or lifestyle or anything, right? Everything's uniform. It's absolute, right? You're a trained animal. Specific indoctrination of that society, that era, that country, that technology, state, everything. That's an absolute, even though by definition it's not, because every other era would have treated their own as absolute. Whenever something's a norm, the norm is just the easiest way to control people, or mediocrity, or mass, collective contrivance. It doesn't mean it's actually a good thing or what you desire. It just means that's how you're controlled as a mass of people, right? This human function state that you're reduced to, as I call it. But it's a situation where again, just think about that close structure contrivance once more. Somebody doesn't act exactly or do exactly the thing that society wants. It could never be that there's a different choice. Maybe they just don't like that superficial basis. Maybe they don't care about appearances. Maybe they don't care about social contrivance. Maybe they don't need it. They don't desire it. They don't require it. So by simply being neutral or choosing something different, it'll be framed as anti. They're negative. They must be against it. They're trying to do it to prove a point, right? It's Bolshevik rhetoric. Anything that exists that isn't exactly the thing that society wants you to do can only exist in opposition to it, and it's evil and it must be destroyed and it's a bad thing. Or, it's the inability. They lack the ability. They don't know any better. This is how weaponization of medicine and labels, you have some condition that makes you unable to do this thing. So it's not your fault. You don't know any better, right? It's the emperor has no clothes fallacy. It is absolute, but if you don't do it, it's not that proves it's not absolute, or somebody could prefer something different or do something different, or the human variable or freedom or self-awareness. Oh no, it is still absolute, but we're just going to attack the observer then and say, it's your fault, you just can't see it, or you just don't get it, or you lack the ability to do it. Right? So social contrivance is a great example of that. It's not a question of whether you should or shouldn't do it, or the manner in which you do it, although it's by definition a subversive state, an anti-thought of the lowest form of thought. But whatever. The point is, same measure, larger process, self-invalidating, it's everything is a reaction to thought anyway. So, like when people say certain things are narcissistic, what's the difference between social media and social interaction on a one-to-one basis? You say, oh, it's narcissistic, but they're the same thing, right? Like, who wants to hear about your day? Who wants to hear about your random stuff? Like, you're socially insisting upon yourself versus doing the same thing except to a larger group of people. So, like, self-awareness is the enemy, but you're doing the same process. So, is it really any different? And so, yeah, everything is a reaction to thought. Like, social contrivance is a reaction to thought. You're kind of dumbing it down, lowest common denominator, reducing yourself to that functional initial basis. Instead of, again, the infinite objective mind, you're kind of reducing and dumbing down to your limited physical state. And so the only thing you got to understand is the fact that, again, the emperor has no closed fallacy. You're not doing this absolute thing that you must do, that society says you have to do. Who says you have to do it? Right? Why do you have to do it? Some functional, overextended basis that you didn't choose, that's subjective, non-accountable, half-mass, undefined, right? Inconsistent. If you do it too much, too well, right? It invalidates the process, removes the need. It's only necessary to reinforce and regurgitate a half-mass state, right? It's a self-created conflict of contrivance. The village of 100 would not need anything, just either it's functional basis, so it just serves as self-insistence, right? Overextend self-interest to the collective, or vice versa. Just a way to control people, right? Just a way to do some ego gratification, overcompensation. But the bigger thing is that you understand the differences that, again, you don't do exactly the thing, whatever culture or society it might be. Oh, you just lack the ability to do it. So they'll label you. You're some negative element. You're some, anti. It must be, you're doing it to prove a point and to defy it, to defy society's thing. So anything you do, any of the many things or lifestyles you could possibly do, must be in defiance of this one correct absolute one, right? And so, again, it's not that it isn't absolute. It's that anyone who observes or practices something different, they're the enemy. They're discredited. They're, shoot the messenger. Emperor has no closed fallacy. And it also goes to, again, that variable that I'm talking about. Like, think about all the different kind of lifestyles you could potentially do, right? And society will go so far as to outward insist and overextend to the point of preventing you from doing that. It's like going under each one of these bridges can cause it to crash because of the Starlink Mini, but I don't think it does actually do that. Because, oh no, it loses sight of the sky for 1 second. But it happens so frequently. But no, you have the close structure contrivance, you have, so again, something is absolute. Even if you want to argue a functional basis, that's not exactly what it is. It's overextended to collective mass, and you would hold it consistently accountable to that, and so forth, because, it's sort of one of those things, just don't think about it, you think too much, but it is the same thing. It's a process that you're being controlled by, so you could either think about it, and you would have some cognitive dissonance, or realize the nature of the process, and maybe have some issue with it, or you could not think about it, and the process is still present, and you're controlled by it. So now it shifts the burden to the observer, right? It's your fault for observing or being aware of this process, and that makes you negative. That means you're cynical, that means you're incentivized, that means you're this, you're that, right? Even if the process is still present, right, it's your fault for not adequately overcompensating for it, or for being aware of it, or making others aware of it. But that's kind of what cringe is, right? What does the word cringe mean, or what does the word embarrassing, or something like that? It's doing the same exact thing that you were going to do anyway, but just being made aware of it. So awareness is the enemy, not the nature of the process. Again, regardless of what you think of the process, that you should at least be aware of it, but it's kind of like you can't be, otherwise you wouldn't accept it. So that's like the half-mass cognitive dissonance state. So it really kills the credibility of every, person in that state. But a good example is like that one clip of the girl in the car with her dog or whatever, and she's kind of doing that Renegade song. Like, so she's think about this for a second. She's reacting to this Renegade song and dancing along with it in her car, and she's filming herself, presumably with the intention to share it with somebody or social media or whatever. So you're filming yourself doing something, and so you're evident, and you want to share it with other people. So evidently you're not embarrassed by it. In fact, you're even proud of it, or you're trying to show it off. But then somebody watching from across the street in their car, she notices them at the end, and then she's embarrassed. So you're embarrassed of a person watching you do the very same thing that you want other people to see, and that you're showing off to other people, and that you're choosing to do. So it's embarrassing if somebody watches you, but it's not embarrassing if somebody watches you, because that's the exact purpose for which you're making it. Like, you could say, well, it's a different angle, or, you know, they're watching without consent kind of a thing, but it's more like she's embarrassed at the act of what she's doing. Oh, look at this silly person dancing in their car, how funny. But they were doing that anyway. They chose to do that. They were recording it. They were intending to share it. Like, so the same exact thing that you're doing, it's okay if you just do it, right? Again, people lacking self-awareness. It's okay if you just do it, but it's not okay if you are made aware of it. As if that should be the enemy of the defining factor. No, like, either it's a sound process that you're okay with it, or you're not. Right? So it's not telling you whether you should do it or not, but you should be at peace with it and aware of the nature of the process. But instead, people live in that sort of state of unreality that, like, it's a constant state of constant contrivance, appearances, pretenses. Like, we got to constantly distract ourselves and cover everything up. It's kind of like, you know, we defer to, like, the human ego, collective basis, bypassing critical thinking, by which you're controlled, which shouldn't be necessary if it's a sound process. But the bigger point is the fact that, and again, thought and objectivity are something that anybody can do, but everything is instead framed on a subjective level, myopic. Because, like, you'll notice in these discussions, especially with how long they are and how long they go on for, and how many different ones that I've done over the years, it's like the point of it is objectivity. So, like, you might ask, like, what am I, you know, sometimes people ask, what are you talking about, or what is the point? It's like, maybe there isn't a point. You're observing the nature of reality against contrivance response to it, so that you're at least aware of it, and then you decide what to do with it on your own. Right, so what the assumption is that people wouldn't tolerate the contrivance state, or it wouldn't be so uniform if they were simply objectively aware of it. Right, what are the chances that 8 billion people would all live in relatively uniform way, or whatever, like hundreds of millions of people, let's just say in the US or something? What are the chances that they would all live in this relatively uniform way and do this kind of robust, kind of singular lifestyle, right, that aligns in so many ways? What are the chances, right? Like, I have an expression, if you looked at everything objectively and self-actualized for yourself from an inherent base state and had the freedom to do that, what are the chances you would choose exactly the lifestyle that you have right now? And it's pretty much 0%, right? Again, one person might do it. One person might do it. A few people might do it. But it has to be kind of created through herd mentality, because otherwise there'd be a lot of variance. People would choose to do a lot of different things, right? So it's not, it wouldn't be, there's never a one-size-fits-all uniform, universal thing. Right, that's just not how it works. And so, like, this grounded primacy on a half-mass state is necessary, but it's kind of like, it poses itself as an absolute or some greater thing, but it's still a zero-sum process, so. And the fact that it's necessary to reinforce the state is itself bad, and then it comes with, like, a self-fulfilling preconceived notion. 2, the fact that, you know, that there's certain things like, for example, your view as a person in society is impure, right? So even in this context, I can try to be objective, and I always try to do that, but it's, you know, very discouraged and not compatible, arguably, with functional half-mass state. But whatever, the point is, your perspective is impure because it's incentivized, right? You've already been created by this current process, society, everything like that. You've already, you know, been indoctrinated by it, you're accountable to it. So the way that people think is in terms of cognitive dissonance and trying to counter it, like, you're not looking at the world for the truth of something, because that's not useful to you, or, oh no, that doesn't, you know, give you any special treatment. It wouldn't point to you or your interest or your benefit. You're looking at the world only to reinforce your current lifestyle, your current worldview, your current whatever you need to do, right? So you'll only see things in a way that reinforces yourself and your narrow kind of egotistical view, right? Egocentric kind of self-centric view. So that's where you understand the big picture, is that that was just like a little bonus New Year's episode of this, but basically I'll do the Hearthstone special thing later, right? Like later tonight. I don't know. I feel like I did that either last year or the year before. It might have been the year before, like where I was trying to bring in the New Year with Whiz Bang or some gimmick deck like that. Right. So you can do that later.